Hello and welcome to Inside Music, episode number 211. As always, I'm your host, James Shotwell, and it's great to be with you again. My guest this episode is none other than the iconic Kristian Larsen of the band Manticora, whose latest album, To Live, To Kill, To Live, is available now. Now, this is the second part in a two-part series from the group that coincides with an epic 300-plus page book. It's one of the most impressive feats in modern metal, and Kristian's going to tell us about how it came together today, and in many ways, how it saved his band. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Manticora, it's time to get familiar, especially if you're a fan of heavy metal. The group has been around for 2 decades, and though they've undergone several member changes, the core group remains the same, and they remain creative as ever. Before we get to that conversation, I do need to tell you a few quick things. This episode of Inside Music is brought to you by Holix, the music industry's leading promotional distribution platform. Record labels and independent artists trust Holix to share their new and unreleased music with members of the media, and you should too. Visit Holix.com today, that's HAULIX.com today to begin a free 1-month trial. That's HAULIX.com. I also want to encourage you to check us out on YouTube. We have a channel called Music Biz where we post 3 to 5 clips every single week, all hosted by yours truly. So check it out. Go to youtube.com/musicbiz. Now that's all I have for today, so please sit back, relax, and enjoy this conversation with Kristian Larsen of Manticora. Well, I appreciate your patience. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
That's wonderful.
Been a great day so far.
Yeah, I think I'm among your first calls of the day. You have several more to come after this, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Do you like days like today? Like, do you enjoy putting all of your press in like one big row and knocking them out?
Yeah, I really appreciate that because it takes time, and I have a busy life, so it's really great that things can be put into rows like today.
Yeah, it has to be simpler. We recently did some stuff for a special project where we ended up having to do a bunch of press, and I foolishly just said yes to like anything whenever it was offered to me, and then I ended up just like every day being like, oh, I have to set aside an hour for this or 30 minutes for that, and then it ends up just it kind of sucks a little bit of the fun out of it because it starts to feel more like a chore rather than just like being like, today is the day I do this and then I'm done with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, man, let me tell you, I spent the last several days listening to the new record, To Live, To Kill, To Live, and I think it's something special. You know, I have always loved the world of metal, and I heard the last album. I was excited to hear this one. The one thing I haven't done, which is something that I want to talk about so much that I always find fascinating, is that there's a book component to the last couple of releases, and the creativity of the band. I mean, I don't want to get too far in my ahead of myself because anyone listening to this that isn't familiar with your group, you guys have been around for 23 years. So they have a lot of catching up to do. And you don't exactly write short records, so they have a lot of catching up to do. But if they wanted to like jump to the present day, you guys put out a record in 2018. It's pretty wonderful. Now you guys are putting out what is essentially the second half of that album. And in the middle of all that, you somehow found a way to tour the world and put out a 300-plus page novel, which is like more creative output than most artists have done in the last 10 years. So I want to go back to before the last record. You know, take me back to when you guys set out for this epic project. Like how does that conversation start as a band? How are you like, you know, for the next thing, let's go above and beyond in such a big way?
It's actually a funny question because before this journey, let's call it that, started, we were actually thinking about splitting up the band because we had a lot of lineup changes at that moment. And all of us were pulling apart, growing in different directions, and it ended with only Lars, the lead singer, and I left in the band. And to make a very long story short, we sat in my garden one night during. We had a lot of gin and tonics and beer, and Lars told me that he was writing a novel, and I said, "Oh wow, can I read it?" And he said, "Yeah, of course you can read it." And then he sent me his notes. At that moment, it was a few pages here and there, a couple of chapters, and so on. And I started reading it, and my first impression was, "Wow, how badly injured in your head are you exactly?" And we laughed. We laughed about that for a few hours, and then we started, as we always do, started talking about music. It started about the fact that it's sad that Manticora is pointing towards the end because we are only two now. And then we got more and more drunk, and then we actually decided that evening that okay, if we are ever going to release an album again, let's do it completely extraordinary. Let's Lars finish this book and print it, and then let's make a concept album taken from all the stories there. At that moment, we did not know that it was going to be a double concept album, but that was actually the first start, and we started to speak to other musicians if they wanted to join this project, and we found Stefan, the other guitarist, and we found at that moment Sebastian was playing bass, and we had no drummer. But we started to write a lot of music at that moment, and it took several years just creating things and actually figuring out whether we could create music like this as a completely new band. And it turned out really good, and more songs came to life. And in the middle of all this, we had this huge whiteboard with all the chapters from the book and all the songs that were more or less finished. And we started to make a lot of arrows and pointings, and then we looked at it and say, this is not a single album. This has to be a double album. And that was actually the beginning of it. So it started with Lars and I really drunk in my backyard, and now I'm here.
It has to be weird to think back that, one night in your garden can lead to what has become, of half a decade of working on a single project.
Yeah, it is. It is. Actually, when we finished recording in the studio and we popped the champagne, and I had this weird feeling. It was like, wow, we actually did it. Against all odds, we did it. We only had a guitarist and a lead singer, a half finished book at the starting point, and now we're done. And it was a really weird feeling when we popped the champagne and said, "This is it." So yeah, it is kind of strange thinking back on the early days.
Especially when you consider that prior to this one conversation that you thought maybe the band would be at the end. I mean, at that point in your career, it was, I can see how it would be fitting. I mean, not only with the members, but you guys had recently played Wacken, so you'd like been to the top of the mountain in terms of like festivals and like where you could go. You've played the shows, you've written the music, so I'm always kind of fascinated by people that you kind of check all these things off a list, right? And then you're like, well, what are we supposed to do now? And you found that thing in maybe the most unlikely of ways.
Yeah, and as you said it, that was also one of the really difficult parts about it. It was, as you said, well, we've released a lot of albums, we've toured the world almost, and we played, as you said, we played Wacken, and that was one of my dreams. That was to play on the festival that I have attended for so many years. So it should have been the perfect period right there. It should not just have been the end, but something just happens when you are creative as I am and Lars is. Well, we can't stop. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
I totally understand what you're trying to say, and I agree. It's there's nothing more exciting than, I think, when you get past that bump, when you have that point where you're like, I think I might have run the course with this thing, and then you find that next great idea, like that second wave of excitement that kind of comes over you, where you find yourself like very much engaged with the thing again, being like, oh, we're doing it. This is why we do this thing. This is what we've been looking for. We found it, and now we're going, and here you are. I'm curious how you feel now that, the second part of this is about to come out, the final chunk of this project. Like, are you guys now looking for that next thing to be like, okay, well, we've gotten through the book, we've gotten through the double release, and now where do we go?
You will. Actually, we haven't thought about that much. The next chapter in Manticora is unknown at the moment.
That's okay. I think you
Wants to
got some
create
time.
music. Yeah. We need a break at the moment, but I know that all of us wants to create music again, and we already have a lot of ideas. And the thing is in Manticora, all ideas are received, and nothing is. All of us decides really what's going to happen. And right now we have 4 or 5 ideas already, but we need to take a vacation from the production and from the songwriting for a moment now, because it has been a long journey and there are a lot of songs on those 2 albums. So I don't know what the next chapter is going to be actually.
How has it been for you as a band in this era? It's kind of hard not to look at the elephant in the room with what's happening in the world, to have all this material but be unable to share it with your fans in the live setting.
Yeah, it's really sad because along with this project, we had a lot of ideas for the stage as well. Luckily, we toured a lot on the first album, and we have this character coming in this blue suit and the katana sword, and we wanted to follow it up with a new appearance because this guy changes, and so we had a lot of ideas that should have been um, rounding up this entire concept. But it's really sad that we can't get on the road playing for our fans, because I know for a fact that our fans would really, really want us to go on stage again. But yeah, it's just sad, and the music industry has been hit really hard regarding this, because yeah, it's a lot of people being mashed together in a small room, and that's just not going to happen at the moment.
Is there any way for, I don't know where you all are located. Like, are you a band that all lives in the same place, or are you all spread out? Is there a possibility you can do one of these live stream events that people are getting so excited about right now?
Actually, we about that, but the thing is that it takes a lot of gear and it takes a lot of planning to create a live stream concert. And at the moment, we can't. Well, it's too much to handle for us at the moment, because we have to do everything ourselves, Right now, we have like 5 gigs in Denmark, and we have to use our energy on those 5 gigs, and then see what happens after those 5 gigs.
I think the majority of musicians on the planet would kill to have 5 gigs on the calendar right now. So you're in a very fortunate position, I think.
It's going to be strange because they're all going to sit down. So that's the thing. The Danish government said that it's okay to make concerts, but you can only take a max of 300 people, and they have to sit down during the concert. So we are actually, for the first time ever, we're going to play for 5 gigs for 300 people sitting down. So it's going to be really weird.
Yeah,
But
I can't imagine.
not to
I mean, maybe they'll just have to wave their arms a bunch or something. Do a little movement.
Yeah, something like that. It's going to be really strange going on stage, seeing people sitting down, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I know how it can be. You know, you look out to the audience to get that energy and to see how they're reacting to what you're doing, and to look out, especially as a band like yourselves, and then just see people sitting there. You're going to be like, is this going well? Is this good? What does this mean?
Yeah. Is this good for anyone?
Is this
Yeah, it's going
weird?
to be strange, but yeah, exactly. I know what you mean. And the thing is that as a musician, you really need the audience when playing, because that's what it's all about. So when they're sitting down, arms crossed, clapping, it's gonna be weird.
I'm curious. Something I always like to ask people that have been in music for a long time, such as yourself, is whenever I talk to young musicians about, you know, their first album or their second album, and I'm like, what do you guys hoping to do with this record, or how do you judge if this is a success? They're always like, we're gonna take the world by storm and change everything. And you're somebody that's been through the industry machine several times over at this point. You're a couple decades in. You've put out a ton of records. You've put out concept albums. You've toured everywhere. So when you're looking at a release like this one, you're about to put out a new record. Is it already a success in your book? Like, how do you define success for Manticora and for yourself as an artist now, as opposed to maybe when you were younger?
When I was younger, I had a bucket list, and the first line was releasing an album. So that pretty much is done now. But today, I think that the success is actually that we pulled through this huge concept of writing a 300 pages book and doing 2 albums, and also they come as vinyl editions as well, and we do everything ourselves. So for me, success is just the fact that it succeeded, because I know that all of us in the band are really proud about, especially the second album, because I think we overdid ourselves on the latest, on To Live, To Kill, To Live. We had more time recording everything, and on this release, everything sounds exactly like we wanted it to do. On the other releases, we've always been on a tight schedule. You have 3 weeks and you need to record everything. And especially Lars, the lead singer, always had like 3 or 4 days to do whole albums. And now he had like 4 months. So the success for this latest release is actually that everything sounds and looks exactly like we wanted it to do. So that must be it.
That is great to hear, man. I like that. I like that, the idea that your first bucket list item was just release an album, and now you're like, I have accomplished that in every way imaginable at this point. It's a good way to keep yourself in check. So when you when you hear from young metalheads today, people that are like, I want to play in a band, or I play guitar and I want to get into music, like, what is the advice that you give people? Like, what do you tell them about trying to quote unquote make it in music today?
Well, actually, when I speak to a young musician who just sit at home, try things out, maybe they have a band, I always tell him or her, for that matter, the most important thing is really to have fun. The moment it starts to become a business, or the moment it starts to become stressed up and it starts to ruin your private life, stop. Because this is not the 90s anymore. This is not the 80s anymore. It's a tough business, and you have to do this because you love it. If you're in this for the money, then you are going the wrong way. So that's the first advice. Make sure that you really love what you're doing and have fun while doing it. And that's rule number one in Manticore has always been, is this fun or is it work? And whenever it became a hard job or everyone was stressed up, we immediately stopped and threw everything on the floor and said, stop, this is not funny anymore. The second thing is really just find your style and be yourself when creating music. Don't just do what everyone else does, because if you become one of the others, nobody cares. And in my opinion, I always like the bands that stand out from the others, because it's more interesting. It's like a piece of art. And if you see the same picture 4 times with different colors in it, it's still the same picture. So be yourself and stand out. That's the two best advice I've ever given to young musicians, really.
I can't argue with either one of those points. I think that you're absolutely right. I think I say the same thing to people. I'm like, make sure that it's the thing that gets you out of bed in the morning. And if it ever stops being that, then change what you're doing, or maybe it's you. Then listen to that. You know, trying to force the creativity or the success is never the way to make it actually happen.
Exactly. Exactly. It's so important that you have fun.
Well, man, I really appreciate you taking some time to talk to me today. I've been listening to the record, like I said, this week. I think it's really great. I talked to your publicist, John Freeman, and he was telling me about the novel, which I personally, admittedly, haven't been able to read, but he was telling me about it, helping me get the full scope of it. And I was excited to talk to you, and you certainly did not disappoint as a guest today. Before I let you go, I do want to ask one last thing of you, and that is, you know, what have you been listening to lately? What is Kristian listening to?
Besides from my own music,
That's very good. Yes.
uh, well, actually, I'm not listening to music at the moment. Uh, um, no, not really. The last thing I really listened to a lot was the recent Tool album, because I'm a huge Tool fan. So that should be my answer.
I think that's a great answer. I dug that record, spun it a lot. I'm looking forward to Pussifer doing a new album in the future. I pretty much just go
Yeah,
wherever Maynard goes. That's my rule of thumb.
yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, you have a great day. Do impress. The album is fantastic. I hope you feel great about it, because it itself is great. And I hope that we can connect again soon down the line. Hopefully, I'll get to see a Manticore show at some point in the future.
I hope so too. Thank you very much, James. Nice to speak with you.
Nice to speak with you. Have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.